Hi, good morning, Fatima.
Good morning, Dr. Rodriguez.
Well, thank you for joining. So far, you're the only one.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sure there'll be a few more. I have another one coming in now. But I just sent out that link, and if it's less, then we'll just have a more customized
Oh,
session together. Okay, I know we'll get a couple more. Here comes Luis. Good morning, Luis. Glad to see you. So it's just a couple of you right now. Hopefully we'll have a few more join, but that's okay because I'm going to go ahead. I record the session for others to access later. So I'll just go ahead with what I had planned, and I'm sure others will join as we continue on, and we'll just, see what we have and then have more of a discussion afterwards if we're a small group. So right now I have sent out, hopefully you see the link and you're able to get to the Google Drive. I've sent it out a few times because I think if you come in after, you don't see what I'd sent before. So hopefully everybody sees that in a minute. I'll just get started sharing my screen, but let me just give a couple more minutes just in case some are moving slow today. I hope the the time change that I did for this session didn't mess people up, but I sent out an announcement as a reminder. So hopefully those that want to join will be doing it soon. Hope you guys are doing well. Let's see, a couple more and I'll get started here. Go ahead and share. And like I said, like I usually say, you'll see, you got access to the session here, but let's work together through the slides so we can stick together with what I want to talk about this morning and the way that I want to go through everything. So just make sure that you're signing in. I'm trying to scoot that over so that you can see. Okay, you should be able to see the question there. I just have a couple. I just want you to start thinking about, thinking back to when you write or you are summarizing work that you're doing with students. What are things that you include in that conversation or in that summary, in that writing? So take a couple of minutes and I'll see if anyone else joins as we're getting things going this morning. So for those of you that can remember back to our EDRE 4850 class, that's the assessment class. We had a case study that you did with a student where you had to summarize their work. Hopefully you'll remember some of that and think about what are the things that you had to do or that you had to include in that summary. Okay, so we're going to keep on going, but that's getting you going, thinking about what we're going to be discussing today. Okay, so we have a very small group, but that's okay. We're still all together finishing up our test prep series for this set for our 13 competencies that are covered in the Science of Teaching Reading exam. And, most of you have been to at least one or two, or if not more. But whether you are attending live or accessing the recorded sessions, I hope that you're finding them helpful and that you continue to access the folders because like I've said many times, those I'm continuing to add material in each folder and each competency as I find things and as I think about other material that will be helpful. So our usual way to get started is our little pep talk, a little motivational, and that's for this morning. We're just excited that we're finishing up our series. We see a finish line ahead. When we think about this review, the work that you've been putting in with these sessions, and recognizing that we're getting closer and closer to, accomplishing that goal. And like I said, getting your own classrooms and of course, being successful on this exam. So we're excited, and I know you've been doing a lot of work, whether on your own, attending these sessions, whatever you have to do to prepare. even if it's, just getting your assignments done for the semester and observing, all of the things that you're doing is working towards this goal. So I'm just congratulating you on that and starting to feel good that we're reaching this point. And, from here forward, it's really on you to determine what's going to work best for your study, but recognizing you have a lot of resources and a lot of knowledge already under your belt to prepare you. So guys, this is where we are today, finishing up. We've worked our way all the way through 2 competencies at a time in each session. Yesterday, we had that in-depth study of round comprehension of different types of texts. Excuse me. And today, we're looking at the last section, the last domain that is covered in this exam, and it is called an analysis and response. There are 18 questions in this section, and it represents 20% of the exam. But the big thing for you to be aware of in this section is that now we're not talking about multiple choice questions, it's a written response. And so what you're doing now and seeing this same, hot air balloon illustration every session to help you remember about the different skills we've been studying, what we're doing now is pulling it all together. Every piece of the balloon is now being covered when you're writing about what you're seeing that students are doing, or what their strengths and needs are in these different areas. And so the idea is that in Competency 13, you're pulling together all of the knowledge that you showed that you have through Competency 1 through 12. And so what does that statement say? The competency states, and analyze assessment data related to reading development and foundational reading skills and reading comprehension, and prepare an organized, developed, written response based on the data and information presented. And so this might sound a little bit daunting just because of the language that's being used here. But like I said, we've done this before. You've been doing this as you are working with students, doing assessments, whether in my class or other classes, and then looking at those assessments and saying what you see, what you notice, and what they're doing well and what they need to work on. So it's really an opportunity for you to expand on everything that you know in a consolidated way when you're writing your response. So now you don't have to narrow it down to figuring out one best answer. You get a chance to write it out and be detailed about it. So I think it's a good opportunity for you to really pull all the knowledge together that we've been working on throughout our series of test prep, but also throughout your program, our teacher ed program. So this comes straight from the test prep packet as far as what you're supposed to be thinking about in this section, that you're constructing a response based on some data that they will give you. And it's up to you to study that data and think about how you'll organize it. You can make some notes, kind of map out an outline about what you want to include. And the main thing is that you address all the components that they are asking you to address in your response. So some of those components might be easier or harder for you, and we're going to be looking at those, of course. But the idea is to be as detailed as possible, and it is a 400 to 600 word limit on that writing, which sounds like a lot, but once you start writing, it adds up quickly. So like I said, you're doing maybe an outline, putting down some notes on and making a draft, but then when you are typing in your final response in this section on the actual exam, you're working to make sure you're doing your best writing, thinking about grammar and structure and punctuation and all of those things that, we're looking for when you're scoring and analyzing a summary of work. And of course, you're not copying or paraphrasing anything else. I mean, this is all during the exam time within the time that you have for the Science of Teaching Reading exam, you're also doing this piece. So it really doesn't, I don't know how you'd be able to copy or paraphrase work, that you won't have access to it. Use citations when appropriate. We can talk about how you might be doing that, or that might not be pulled in as part of your response. It just depends on what the question is and how you're addressing it. So just more details here that I wanted to make sure that you had the, access to. I don't want to read everything. It's basically just saying that you're going to respond inside of a text box. Inside of a text box as a response to the data that you're showing. That's where you're going to write your information. And so within the actual test, you'll see that there's a word counter so that you'll see where you are with your response and the number of words you have. And note that the size, shape, and placement will depend on the content of the assignment. So of course, depending on what they're asking will depend on exactly how that looks. Okay, so this is what I really want to get to and what I want to spend most of our time on, just like we talk about each time. Let's do some practicing. And the way that we're going to practice is to review some data together and practice doing some writing and doing some chatting. And this is appropriate with the number that we have. It's just let's look at the data that we have and just do some practicing on how this will look. And as we finish up today, I'll give you access to a resource where you can do your own practicing independently and see how you do on that. But for right now, just like always, our plan is to delve in and get an idea of what's expected and do some work around it, and then you take it from there for what you need. So I have a student named Jackson. Some of you may have seen some videos of Jackson, or you will be seeing in if you're in classes with me now. And what I've done is I've done assessments in each of the literacy skills areas. And so what we're going to do is look at the results of those assessments and kind of discuss what are the things that we would say he's doing well and what are his needs, and just kind of have that conversation as a practice for this section. So for right now, what you're seeing here is the assessment results for the phonological segmentation test. And if you go to this link, it will take you to that assessment so you can look at it more closely. I'm not going to do that just for our time, but I want you to, that's a resource for you to study it more closely to see exactly what each looks like. But for our purposes of example here and demonstration, we're just going to do this review of, okay, so for phonological segmentation test in these areas, here's his results: 5 out of 5 in the first section, 6 out of 8, and 9 out of 10. And hopefully these areas look familiar, guys. This is pulling from what we studied way back in our phonics, in our phonemic awareness and our phonological awareness test prep sessions, that you see this progression of difficulty. First, we're just no understanding how many words are in a sentence. Then it becomes how many syllables are in a word, a little bit more challenging. And then it becomes how many phonemes are in a word, even more challenging. So going from the bigger to the smaller. And so we can say, just look at those results. I'm not going to say what we can say quite yet. Okay, so didn't want to go there quite yet. Go back one. Okay, I'm wanting to go back. I wasn't ready. Come on. I'm trying to get, okay, there we go. And then the next assessment, and this is really the progression of assessments. You do these early phonological awareness ones first. And then a little more challenging, looking at the phonemic awareness piece and the later mid to late phonological awareness skills that we've looked at. And so what Jackson did on these, at the basic syllable level, he 12 out of 12. And you see two different results, correct and automatic. And that just tells us he was either kind of breaking the word apart and then he would put it together to do it correctly, or he did it really quickly. And if they did it quickly, then we say that's an automatic response. That was not hard for him to just look and be correct on this task. And so the next level in this assessment is practicing onset and rhyme, and then going to basic phoneme practice with replacing phonemes at the end or the middle of the word, and then a more advanced phoneme practice. And again, you can look at the assessment here, which gives all the details about exactly what's included. But for our purposes, we can just study these results and see exactly at which level Jackson, it begins to get hard for him, where it's easier and where it's harder. Now, this is what I want to look at a little bit more closely, because these are just some quick videos. And actually, in the example that I have for the practice that they've shared with us for this section, there's a little video also. So I think that that's going to be included as a part of your data. So I thought that would be a good practice also. So what you will see here is the phonics assessment. It's not very long. And so right away you're thinking, okay, we're assessing phonics. Now we're not doing sound assessment. We are doing letter assessment and the work that the student is doing with letters. And so what I want you to look at is looking at the video as well as the data that I have next to it. And so these are the results that you're going to see from this video here in just a second. And then if you go to the link, it should take, you'll get a bigger page, be able to see it more clearly. And meanwhile, if you just have a piece of paper or a pen, it's just to not jot down. I noticed Jackson doing this. Here's something he's doing well. Here's a question mark, something that I'm thinking about. So just anything that you can observe during this assessment, brief assessment. So see what notes you can take, and kind of you can do a quick study of on how that compares with the actual score sheet that goes along with it. Okay, babe, start one more time. I'm sorry.
D, F, S, G, B, Y, P, X, L, Z, V, P, N, C, R, H, M, T, K, W, J.
Good. Now let's do the same thing, but now tell me the sounds of all of these letters. So go through and tell me the sounds.
D, S, G, B, Y, P, X, U, Z, P, N, K, M, T, K, W, J,
Go all the way down.
P.
Okay. So what I'm wanting you to notice is what he's saying, and then some, of course, I know you can't see all those letters, but the score sheet helps you to distinguish exactly what he said for each one. And like I said, if you need to go to the link to see it more clearly, you can do that. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to notice, here's some things that he's doing consistently, here's what's easier and what's harder. Jotting that down. Okay, this is the second part, continuing on. Okay. Okay, now what do you see?
My vowels.
Nice. Now tell me their names.
A, E, I, O, U.
Good. Now tell me the sounds.
A, E, I, O, Y.
Nice job, Jax. Okay, now tell me which ones of these you know. We'll go like this. Go down and then scoot it over as you're reading. Okay, so just try any of these that you can. Point to them and then keep going if you don't know.
Dan.
Okay.
Up, rup. App. Peen. fist,
Keep going. You're doing a great job.
rod, red,
Here, scoot that. Look at that right there.
oh, ram,
Okay.
rem,
Now, same thing here.
tuck, dag, calm,
Scoot that over, please.
up, mop, up, gum, ref,
Nice job, babe. Okay, let's try some of these here because you're doing so great on those. Okay, same thing, but they're just smaller because I didn't write those ones out. So just see, let me get these out of the way. See which ones you can do here.
Miz, das, pass, pill, plop, hit.
Okay, babe, let's stop there. Great job, though. Give me 5. Give me 5. Okay, so now I want to, okay, let's see. First, let's take a couple of minutes, and in a minute we'll actually write, but for right now, let's just talk about what you see if with what you know at this point, what you see or what you can observe from the data that Jackson can do with sounds and also with letters. So thinking back first to the data that I shared at the beginning right here, what can we say that he is doing well with phonological awareness, and what can we say might be a need for him in phonological awareness? And so just go ahead and unmute. We don't have a big group, so hopefully we can just kind of chat here for a minute. So I'll start. I noticed that Jackson is doing well with putting sentences into words, counting out the words in a sentence, 5 out of 5 there. Who can add something else?
The words is on the syllables. He did just he scored good. He did a 6, but he can work a little bit more. We can work more on the syllables.
Okay, so that's an excellent statement. He did well, but he can use a little bit more work. And so if this might be a while back for some of you to think back to that ethnography assignment that I started out at the beginning of the semester in some of our classes, where we have to study and we have that cookie thief video, and we study the way that we are using language that shows just the facts, or make sure that we're not including opinions when we're talking about data. And I think that this is a key thing. That's a key piece to remember and connect to with this section of the exam, because the scores looking at this response, they're going to look for that your responses align directly with the data, and that your recommendations are aligned with what you're saying that you see in the data. And so with that in mind, just like you said, with the section of putting words into syllables, he scored 6 out of 8, which indicates he got almost all of these correct. However, some more work might be needed in this area to ensure that he really deeply understands it. So does that make sense? It's just the way that you're wording that is going to be key.
Yes.
Okay, so
your mind look horrible. Okay, let me see. We're just looking at the at the phonological segment part, right? Just the top
Yes,
part.
just at this one that I have, just at these early ones. Who else can jump in? What's something that he did well on this past exam? And what might you say that he needs to focus on for our next work with Jackson? Anyone?
He did really well on the separating words into phonemes. He got a 9 out of 10, so well, I don't think he needs more practice necessarily, but he's doing well in that part. Almost all of them correct.
Good. So your statement, he got almost all of these correct, which indicates he more than likely understands this concept and will not need further assistance. You know, so that's just having a conversation about what you see and then thinking about how can I write that out in my response to, you know, elevate it a little bit and show that I'm really looking at that data and using that data in my response. So what about, who can say something about that past exam? What's something that I noticed he is doing well? I'm wondering if more instruction is needed here. Anyone? Okay, good. I see some. You can put it in the chat box if that's how you want to do it. Okay, so yeah, pointing out that he used letter sounds to make sure he correctly pronounces the words. So you're wanting to, and actually I think that was more noticeable on our phonics piece. I want to point that out looking at phonics. So now let's talk about what he was doing in phonics. Remember, this was all phonological awareness because it was all sound, so working with sounds. And if you look at the assessments, guys, it gives directions on how to do each one and what each of these categories includes. So that's something you can do on your own for further study. So now, and this is a better view than what you see on the video, but it gives you an idea. Like you heard Jackson, but maybe some of it was a little hard to understand. But now you see, here's the scores. And here's exactly what he said and what the actual letter was on these different parts. So can somebody give me a statement about what he's doing with part 1 when it comes to letter names and letter sounds? Anyone? And if you want to put it in the chat, do that. So there's something that's probably standing out to you. I want to hear from you or see it in the chat just to make sure that we're kind of seeing the same thing when we're looking at this data.
You know what? I just noticed something. He's confusing the letters, like the letter D for the B. So you can say he might be just, instead of calling him dyslexia or something like that, that he's just putting his words backwards, letters backwards. So that might be something that you can work with the child, where so he can notice the difference, so he can get the letter correct.
Good. So I was hoping somebody would pull that out either in the chat or in your, just sharing. We see a pattern, right, with the letter names and the confusions that he has. He's doing great. He's doing awesome. All these letter names, all the sounds, but there's a current confusion with DB and QP that is pretty consistent, you know, that throughout this assessment. And so this is something that I will note. And again, careful with our language and the way that we're describing data. So here is what I noticed. He scored 18 out of 21 on letter names and 18 out of 22 on letter sounds, which indicates he knows most of the letters and most of the sounds. However, there is a pattern of a DB confusion and a QP confusion, both in identifying the letter and when identifying the sound, period. That is the statement that I would say when I'm describing what I see in this data. Now, a further statement might be, I wonder if this is an issue with dyslexia. Let's mark that statement out. Because in the components, what they're asking you to respond to, it doesn't say, let's give a diagnosis or a recommendation on what might be occurring if they're struggling. So we're really saying, here's what I see, here's what I would do next, okay? And we're gonna talk about this confusion, but this is what is so interesting and one of the things I love when looking at student data and just watching students read and write, is that right now we're forming a hypothesis. We have that information about what he did with sounds and where it started to get hard. And now we see with his letters where there's a little confusion. And I'm starting to wonder, okay, where are we developmentally as a reader? And is this pattern going to show in each area that we're going to be assessing? Or is this going to be more dominant in some areas than others? So I start having question marks as I'm looking at the data, as you should do when you're studying the data in this section. And of course, when you're studying the data of your own students. And then we got to the words. And again, this is what is helpful for us looking at this assessment. And that's why I'm using this assessment, because it helps us to remember the order in which we need to be working through with the phonics skills, beginning with CVC words and single closed syllables with short vowel sound words. And each section gets a progressively more difficult. And so that helps us to know, which one comes next, which is harder, which is easier. And when we're looking at data, to pinpoint exactly where it got more difficult so that we can then plan our instruction. So either write or tell me, what can you say about what you noticed with how Jackson did on these word lists? What are a couple of things you can say? And the notes just show you, I divide out the way he responded. So one time he said app. He looked at rub and said rup. He looked at ban and said dan. He looked at pin and said peen. For let, he said let. For tip, he said ip, tip. Okay, so that's really a picture of the way that he responded as you're looking through. So let me hear from a couple of you, either in your statements, this is your practice on how to analyze this data. What is he doing when he's looking at words?
Well,
He's,
I noticed, oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Oh, I noticed that after he segments it, he always repeats it back, I guess to confirm his answer, I suppose.
Awesome. That's a great statement right there. So Jackson segments words and then he repeats it to confirm the word. And sometimes he's right and sometimes he's not, but that was a consistent pattern. That's an awesome thing to notice. And if you don't see a video of it, then studying the recorded response, the assessment helps you to see that, because that's what that check mark says. It tells me first he said this and then he said it correctly, kind of like a running record note. Okay, that's a great statement, a great thing to notice. And those are the kind of details that is going to help your scorers to show that you're really noticing those fine details. Now, who can think about that pattern that we pointed out a minute ago, and did it show itself in these words? Anyone? So for ban, he said Dan. For fib, he said fip. For rob, he said rod. So somebody write it out or make a statement here to tell me, what does that indicate? What does this tell us about the pattern? What are we noticing? So Rosa, you found it a minute ago. You said, oh, when I look at these letters, I see he has this pattern of the DB confusion. Do you see
Right.
a pattern showing itself in the way that he's saying these words?
Yes. Yeah, I said that earlier. I was on mute. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was noticing that he also he's doing the same thing here at the bottom. Because of the confusion, he still, that's the way he's pronouncing it because he thinks that that's the way it's supposed to be.
Okay, good. And this is like your big aha. And if I was scoring these, and by the way, I do score these assessments as part of as a work that I do with Pearson. So I actually see students' work and how these look. And so this is what we're wanting to see when we're scoring these written responses, is that you see those patterns and that you're pointing them out. And it's almost like, yay, they spotted it. Yay, they're noticing that. Because that's exactly how we target student instruction when we see it's happening here, it's happening here. So this is something consistent that I want to address. So that's something to think about and something that I would want to see when you're analyzing the data, is where you see patterns and where you see that they're doing better and where you see this is the part that it gets harder. So that means this is where my instruction would target the following lesson with this student.
So that's the way that we should respond it. We should respond it just like you're saying it, that they are doing great, but I'm noticing that they're having a little issue with those two letters, and we will work more on it. That's the way we should respond.
You know, when we're thinking about 400 to 600 words, we can get pretty looking at each area. And so there, and I'm going to show you, like I said, I wanted to do one example that's different, and then one that is straight from the work that they give us for an example. And that way you have two different practices. But for example, I look at this data and there's so many things I can say about it when you think about that. What they really want to see is that I understand how to analyze the data, how to read it and know what it's telling me. So what might be written out as I'm talking about Jackson's phonological awareness, and to also show my understanding of reading foundational skills, might sound something like this. So as I review Jackson's data in the phonological awareness assessments, I noticed that he is doing, the data indicates that he is almost at a 100% in each of the areas of phonological segmentation, including counting words and sentences, putting words into syllables, and putting words into phonemes. As I studied this section of the data on the section on words into syllables, I wonder if that's an area that I might need to address in future lessons, as he was a bit lower in that area than in others. As I review Jackson's work in the phonological awareness screening exam, I see that he did really strongly in the early phonemic awareness skills, the basic syllable area, as well as onset and rhyme. However, when he got to the section on basic phonemes, he struggled a bit, as the data indicates in the automatic responses, scoring 4 out of 10. This indicates that this would be the area in which I would target instruction, and I would not move on to the advanced phoneme, either within this assessment or in the instruction that I planned afterwards, period. So that's probably a good 200 words right there, right? A lot of details that just literally read and explained what I saw in those early assessments. And so you didn't hear words like great. You didn't hear words like awesome, wonderful, he's super cute, all of those things, because what I want to see, what the scorers want to see, are just the facts. So share the facts. I see this, it tells me this. And in a second, we're going to talk about what a little bit beyond what you would want to see there. So does that help to kind of think about how the writing should sound?
Okay.
Yes, that helps a lot. That helped a
Okay,
lot.
good. So now, guys, it's the same thing. And this is exactly what you're going to be doing is reviewing data on what they're doing with sounds, phonological awareness, what they're doing with phonics, and also what they're doing with reading. And in the example that they share from TEA, I'll show you in a little bit, it's they show this as something similar, a child reading. And so again, let's look at this reading. And then I want to hear from you, either through the chat box, type it as you're watching, or make a note to share afterwards. And it's think about all the areas of that hot air balloon, the literacy skills. What can you say about Jackson when you hear him reading a book that is familiar to him? Can you talk about his fluency? What can you say about his comprehension? What can you say about his oral language? What can you say about what he's using when he gets to a hard part? What helps him? What doesn't help him? What patterns have we noticed already? And does it show itself in a reading like this? So many things to think about. I love it. I could talk all day long about students and watching them read and write. So I might be a little more enthusiastic than you are, but hopefully it's an example just of exactly what you're expected to do in this area. It's a chance to just show off how you can analyze what students can do. And that's what you should do, is really get an in-depth discussion on it. So same thing, watch Jackson, take notes, make notes in the chat box, think about what we can say.
Animals. Which one do I do first?
Do the one that you are familiar with, your easy book. That is really fun.
Puppy Danny.
So this is what the book says down there as you're hearing it.
Danny couldn't sleep. Animals. Which one do I do first?
Do the one that you are familiar with, your easy book. That is really fun.
Puppy Danny. Puppy Danny. Danny couldn't sleep. Dad told him a story. The story was about a little puppy. The little puppy's name was Danny.
Why are you laughing?
Because that's the dog's name in that real thing. When you were a puppy, you were so little. You were so little. I could hold you up over my head. Aw. When you were a puppy, you were so little. You were so little. I could put you by the sink, and I would brush my teeth. Look, he's like literally sitting by the sink. That's all he is. When you were a puppy, you were so little. You were so little. I could put you in my backpack and go hiking.
That really makes you
When
laugh.
you were a puppy, you were so little. You were so little. I could pull you, pick you up, and take you to work. That is cute. That is so cute. When you were a puppy, you were so little. I would take you I would tuck you to tell you a story, and you would fall asleep. Aw. Good night, Danny.
That is a cute book. You did such a good job. I want to show you something. I'm so proud of how well you're doing, Jax. I love you. You're doing awesome. And I love this story. And I can tell you love it too. That's what's so funny. You worked so hard right here, and I was almost going to help you, but then I found out I didn't need to help you. You figured out this word all by yourself. How did you do that, babe?
For a minute, I was saying E, but it doesn't have a silent E or anything else that would make sense with it. So I just put because sometimes I don't focus on like letters and like their usual sounds when they're vowels. Sometimes and like their second letters. Sometimes I forget vowels don't always make their sounds, and they have two different sounds, which is hard.
Okay, well, the other thing that helped you is really thinking about what makes sense in the story. And you see in the picture actually doesn't really help because it doesn't show that he's telling the story. Mm-hmm. But you really worked on that, and I like the way you looked at those letters to help you figure it out.
Okay, guys. So lots to talk about there. And, just let me start seeing some statements. Put it in the chat box or unmute. We have a little bit more time, but this is really what I'm wanting to cover with you is just this example of examining the data. So what can you say about Jackson? What can you say you're noticing now and thinking about the comprehension, all of those areas, that hot air balloon, comprehension, fluency, oral language, and now the pattern that we've talked about. Did you notice anything whenever he's reading there? What did he do when he got to a hard part? So many things to talk about. He has a good understanding of the meaning of the words during his reading. So I would say that Jackson is clearly comprehending what's being read. How do you know? So for a little further detail, what is the example? And that's what they ask for, an example of how, if you say a statement, what's your example from the data? So if you say he has a good understanding of the meaning of the words, what you're basically saying is he has excellent comprehension based on this example. Can anybody give an example? What helped you to know he was getting it? How did you know that Jackson had comprehension, or would you say he doesn't really understand this story? Yes, there's
because he's able to make like expressions when he's reading. So I noticed that he has a good understanding about what he's reading. That's why.
good. So are you talking about like these little expressions that he puts in between as he's reading pages where he's laughing or making comments?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's an indication of one, there's comprehension, and two, there's enjoyment. And three, the language that's being used in those little small glimpses that you get. Wow, that's something that you could note also when you're talking about details. Clearly, Jackson has a strong control of oral language, especially at his 7-year-old age. I noticed examples of him using words such as literally and hilarious, which you would, actually writing those things down. That's what I'm saying, that you're showing that you're noticing all the details about this student. And all of those details is what then helps you to say, this is what will help him next with instruction. So all of those comments are great. He made the sounds of the letters and repeat some words if he did not think that was the right way to say it. Exactly. So he got to a hard part, which a couple of times, a couple of examples of it, and sometimes he fixed it more quickly, but that one that I pointed out was I will tell you a story. He worked so hard on that, and he did a lot of things, and that's what you would explain. When he got to the word tell in the story, he stopped and first substituted hug. I would hug, and then he repeated. And so it's really giving all those details and just describing what you see. And so then it becomes, and this is where you get a little deeper with showing your understandings. What source of information did he use? He used visual information at that difficult part to get to fix it, to get the word correct. So instead of hug, he looked and he saw that that did not start right. Anyone, was somebody jumping in there?
He also tried to go for meaning. He tried to make sure, does it go correctly on there? He tried to structurize it to make it the meaning to sound like it actually belongs there.
Exactly. He wanted to make it make sense. And really, that's why I kept playing the video, because I asked Jackson, how did he fix that? And he gave us a glimpse into his thinking. And he showed us what helped me was using visual information. And then he got even more detailed about how he was looking at the letters and what he knows about vowels. And that right there is an example of metacognition. Like we've talked about, the idea that the child can talk about his thinking. And so things that we note as well. So the idea, and a lot of, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but the idea is just sharing the example of, you know, just in these 5-minute clips, and that's what you get, a little clip, some data, and then it's for you to write 400 or 500 words. As you can see, there's more than 400 or 500 words worth of things that we can say when we think about all of the areas and our examples that we saw. And one more thing to point out, that the BD-PQ confusion, was it an issue in his familiar reading? Did that get in his way?
A little bit, it sure did. I noticed that I was going to point it out, that he was trying to figure out on the put, I think. He was trying to make it to see which one, if that's where I got the idea, where he was trying to make it if it sounded right, because he was testing it.
But
he was testing it.
He got it correct, right? And I know he said pick, I think. He was saying pick, on where I could pick you up and hold you over my head. And he said, duh, ick. And so ultimately he got it correct. He was able to go beyond that first letter and bring in meaning to help him be correct and make that self-correction. And so this is where we make this big conclusion of, even though we notice this pattern of when he's identifying letters in isolation and looking at words in isolation, when given an opportunity to read a familiar book, the BD and PQ confusion really does not get in the way of his comprehension or understanding the story, because he's able to use meaning to help him get his, to help him self-correct. And this is where we say, awesome. This tells me that he is right on track developmentally. Sometimes things are harder when we're looking at them by themselves, but when we're reading a book that we love and that is easy and that we've read several times, it's not an issue anymore. And the more that we are able to do that, the less it's an issue when we're doing things in isolation. So this is a big aha as you're thinking about where he is developmentally and what our focus would be for the next step. It wouldn't be, let's get out B's and D's and put them in order and worry about that. We see this is not getting in the way of his reading. And that's ultimately what is the things getting in the way of him reading and writing actual books and actual stories. And that one piece is not. And so I do need to wrap up, guys, but just to show you what else, you know, the things that you're being asked is just what we've been talking about. Looking at summarizing and thinking about these different areas as you see data. And then the next step beyond that is to say, here's all the things I noticed, and here's where we would go next. Here's an activity I would do with Jackson following this reading that would be appropriate for this level. And that's where you might say, now we're going to work on looking at those sight words, and instead of pulling them apart letter by letter, we're going to learn how to do them quickly and do some activities around sight vocabulary. and look at that area of CVC words that we saw that he struggled in, and talk about an activity for that. And so the other resources I have are some of the things I pulled in from earlier sessions, because they all apply here, to think about what is his level and what does he need to be doing there as an example of an activity. And then you would even, before we wrap up, let me see either on the chat, what would you say was his stage of reading development? You would want to make that statement. Based on the data, I would say Jackson is in the blank stage of reading development. Either in the chat or just say it out loud. Which do you think? And he might be going in between more than one stage.
No, would you consider him to be, he's almost a fluent? He's fluent because he's not having that, he's having a little issues, but not that much. So
I would say
qualify him as a
between
fluent reader.
transitional to fluent reading. And we, looking at a little more data would help us, but just seeing that he's reading longer books, but we're not quite there where we're saying, he's still learning some different strategies that are helping him when it comes to reading. Somewhere in between transitional to fluent would be, I think, a good place to say that he falls. And then a little further to, because he uses all three cueing systems when reading, and he does consistently self-monitor. However, we don't see examples of him reading a long text with deep meaning. And so we might not be able to say quite fluent yet. And so that's really, again, showing where he falls and showing that you know what that means. What are the characteristics of that stage? So all of that is when a score, that it's like saying bing, bing, bing. That's what we want to see that you understand.
So that means that we will qualify him as a transitional.
I think the statement might be between transitional to fluent. I would say Jackson falls in between the transitional and fluent stages of reading development. And the reason I'm saying this is because his reading indicates he does use all three cueing systems. He does consistently self-monitor. However, I don't have examples of him reading longer text with deeper meaning or really talking about the author's craft. So with the data that I have, I would place him right in between in those stages. And that might be exactly what it says in my statement.
Okay.
So guys, what I pulled out here are just the statements that cut the descriptive statements with this competency, because it's basically everything that we just did. It's a checklist of the components of what you're going to be asked to show. So what are the strategies that what would you ask him to do following our analysis? And then what are the needs in the different areas of literacy skills? And so we just delved into that a bit. But what I want you to see as you follow up with your own practice, this comes straight out of the preparation manual, and you'll see some of the things that I pulled from. But down here is a whole different example with a child named Daniel. And so you could practice doing the same thing and actually writing it. And they're doing the same thing that I did. They're showing you how he did with vocabulary. They're showing you a video of him reading. And they're showing you some data on his letter and word work and giving you description about that. And so it's for you to then interpret and write something, and then go back, and they have sample responses as to what the different scores would look like at these different levels, as well as like a rubric here. And so all of this, I want to make sure you know how to access, because that's what's going to help you to kind of review your own writing. Okay, so that's your next step, is to go in and do some of that on your own. And then guys, just like always, we're wrapping up here, and you have your links of all the folders of all of our sessions, including today's folder, which has everything that I just showed you, including, well, you have this session, so you have the videos, everything to practice. So please make sure that you do the wrap up attendance form today, because it's really
Okay.
looking across all of our sessions, and that is posted on Canvas and available for you. And right now we're just up by cheering and you got this. I'm excited for you and excited to reach this point. And I just want to make sure that you know this is not the end. I mean, I have many of you in class, or our plan is that we're going to set up a one-on-one meeting or small group meetings if you want some more directed assistance as you're studying. So I'm wrapping up with after a busy hour of looking through quite a bit, but I hope you found that helpful.
That's an hour?
Ending. And
That was
guys,
not
if you have any
long. It
questions,
was not
anything
long.
before we finish, just let me know. Otherwise, good luck. Let's be in touch and, you know, use all these resources. And I can't wait to hear when you pass this exam. Thank you guys. Yay, we're done.
It was not long enough. It seems like it was just, what, 20 minutes?
Oh, time went by fast. You must have been having fun. Time flies when you're having fun.
Okay.
Oh, okay, guys. Well, be in touch. Like I said, I'm happy to move forward with helping you with the specific areas you need help in. But right now, that's wrapping up our series, and look at all those resources and make sure you fill out that feedback for me to help me make it better and more helpful.
All of this is recorded, correct? And you're not planning to delete this particular lesson out of Canvas at all, even though the semester is over?
No,
So it
that's
gives us
the
a
good
chance.
thing, is that because our Canvas shell is not tied to a semester, it's just going to be there always, as far as I understand. So as long as you have access to Canvas, you'll have access to that. And then beyond that, I have the Google Drive folders. So if you graduate, they're still going to be in those Google Drive folders that you have the links at the end of every session for. So save those.
Okay, I'm gonna create something where, because I do want it, I want to go over it. And now, from yesterday to today, yesterday I was overwhelmed. Today I feel okay. So now I think that I'm gonna start reviewing, and hopefully I will go through it thoroughly. And when do we have to take this test again?
Well, you know, along with your other one. So as you're finishing up your it's with your certification exams, ideally as your student teaching, you know, that you're finishing them up. But before you're fully certified, you need to have it done.
Hopefully, yeah. We have the
I have a
summer
question.
off. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry.
Go ahead, jump in.
Okay, are they looking for us to talk about the tics when we're writing?
Yes, you know, they do ask that you note that it might not be specifically from the TEKS, but the activity that you note would be appropriate should be like, if it's a first grader, it should be a first grade activity. So you show your understanding of the TEKS in the way that you answer the question.
Okay, so we're probably gonna have to review all of them because we're not gonna know what grade we're gonna get, right?
You won't know, but it will be a primary grade because the
Okay.
teaching reading is that's the foundation. And so you know that you're going to be looking just like what we just looked at. And that's what's in the example they provide also. It's going to be looking at the phonemic awareness and the phonics and the reading.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
assuming that, I mean, it's really what's next developmentally appropriate for this student. So it might be a first grader that's on a kindergarten level. So it's really understanding those stages, like I showed you in the assessment. Where did they stop? And what activity would be appropriate there?
You had a question. Can I ask a question? Is there a TEK for just for language arts for reading and language arts?
Yes, I mean, there's a whole section, it's ELAR, and it's divided into phonological awareness objectives, depending on the grade level, and,
Oh, it is.
and reading objectives. So I'll post those in our folder for today. We've also posted them in our classes and stuff. So I'll just move it over in there for a resource. It's a, you know, a long document that covers the LAR TEKS.
Okay, because I remember when we did the social studies, the quiz we were doing, because I did the lesson plan, and then afterwards, then I took that quiz. It actually helped a lot because I was actually looking at the grade levels and what I was gonna be writing about. It
Mhm.
makes a difference when you actually really looking at it versus glancing at
Exactly.
it.
Look at it a little more closely.
And I think all this time we were being glancing at. Yeah.
Well, let me post the
Am I the only one
I
left?
have, because it really shows that how it progresses across the grade levels, the one that I share. So that will be helpful to look at for ELAR.
Okay. Thank you.
Guys, anything else?
Bye, Dr. Rodriguez.
Bye, Fatima. Thank you for joining. Thank you, everybody. This is recorded and I'll have it posted here in a little bit for today's session. Everything's updated there on Canvas. So please just remember the attendance sheet and wrap up.